From Cleveland, Ohio, it's the Barbecue Central Show on the Barbecue Central Radio Network.
All right, welcome back. It's the second hour after dark, Barbecue Central Show. I am your program host, Greg Rempe. Again, we are broadcasting live from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city of Cleveland, Ohio. Dare I say it, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. Centralites, thanks for joining me after dark. Lots of great stuff going on in the world of barbecue and grilling, and we're going to have a great conversation here with a show sponsor, but more importantly, a man that has a wide and varying history and experience with barbecue, Konrad Haskins. We're going to be talking with him here in just a second. If you want to get in touch with the show at any point, you can do that, 216-220-0966. You can also email the show with your questions at bbqcentralradio@gmail.com. All right, without any further ado, let's go ahead and go over to the hotline and bring up our guest for After Dark, Grand Champion Pitmaster Konrad Haskins. Konrad, thanks for coming on tonight. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm doing great.
All right, Konrad, so obviously we can tell by your accent that you're steeped down way south in Texas, right?
Well, actually, my accent's a little further south than that. I was born in South Africa.
Home of traditional American-style barbecue, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so that's probably the best place to start is how you kind of get involved with barbecue. What are your first introductions to it, whether it be from a father or a grandfather or a family friend or whatever, and then we can kind of build on from there.
Well, earliest childhood memory, 5 years old, grandfather cooking whole steers on a spit.
Whole steer?
Whole steer.
Oh, man. All right, so let's stop there for a second. Now, widely known, widely eaten, widely tried here, at least in the States, is the whole hog. But I can't sit here and actually recollect anybody saying that they've actually done a whole steer. I mean, aside from, no pun intended, a completely different animal. I mean, what are we talking about here weight-wise and setup-wise? How do you get a whole steer around a spit?
You get a very big spit, and it's a young steer. I'm going to guess they were around 1,000 pounds probably on the hoe.
So when you're cooking a whole hog, I mean, we've seen here on television recently with some of the Barbecue Pitmaster shows, you're looking at 200, maybe 250 pounds. I mean, you're easily quadrupling that for weight. Is that just an enormous task, a long task, or is it a fairly not as long of a cook time as you would think?
Oh, it's a long cook time. I mean, you're talking upwards of 24 hours, and you're talking a whole lot of labor.
So how do you go about like prepping a whole steer? Is it something similar to a whole hog, or is it something completely different?
No, it's very similar. It's a very similar process the way you would spit roast a whole hog. You're just scaling up the times because it's going to take longer to cook.
And then you're building, is it a special kind of pit, or are you digging like a trench or something like that in order to house all the fat that inevitably will be dripping out of this thing as it's starting to cook?
Well, the way my granddad had it set up is you had A-frames that supported the spit, the main rod that went through the animal. And then on the A-frames, there were two banked fires of burned down wood for coals, which are radiating the heat up, but there was a gap in the middle, so the fat wasn't actually dripping down right onto the fire. The fire was on either side of where the fat would drip down.
Now, I can imagine if the fat got into the fire, that would be a blaze of seismic and gargantuan proportions.
Yeah, it would stink the place up pretty bad.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what causes you to actually leave South Africa and come to the States?
My dad left South Africa for his career. He was a photographer. And in 1968, we left and went to England. And the story goes, both of my parents tell me this, that the day I got to England, I said, I'm leaving as soon as I can. I don't remember saying that, but when I was 21, I came to the States, and I've never left.
Anything in particular that you don't recall not liking about England and wanting to beat it out of there?
The English people are great, but the weather sucks and the food sucks.
Yeah, well, have you been to Cleveland recently?
No.
The weather sucks, But the people don't suck so much, but the weather sucks, that's for sure. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of talk about how when you get to the States, I mean, does the childhood, does the background just continue on with the barbecue thing, or does it kind of die off for a while and you get back into it? How does that kind of work out here?
Well, I was one of those weird kids that would actually go to bookstores and look at cookbooks and go home and scratch cook out of recipe books just totally on my own. I wasn't being pushed by my mother or my father. It was just something I'd always wanted to do, and the cooking was always just a serious part of my life forever. And it was more grilling than real barbecue up until about 2000, and then in 2000 it got really serious into real pit barbecue.
Did you have some type of cataclysmic event with barbecue that caused you to really seriously focus in on that at that point?
I'd been looking at smokers as I walked through the big stores for quite a while, and I was looking. And in 2000, I was working for Microsoft, and they moved me to the home office, and we got a nice house with a nice back deck, and it was just like, you know what, it's time to buy that smoker I always wanted to buy. So I just went out and I bought a new Bronzefell Cattleman, which a lot of people cut their teeth on, and that's what I cut my teeth on, and it taught me. And it was a lot of work to keep temperatures and up and even, but it taught me how to barbecue.
Is that something you still have today, or did you get rid of it?
I got rid of it, but I gave it to a friend of mine, and I'm seriously thinking about going and asking him for it back.
Nothing says the sign of a good friend like giving and then taking back. That's what I always say. Now, if we look at your back deck right now, what kind of cookers do you have out there?
Weber Ranch Kettle, Weber Smoky Mountain,
Ranch Kettle,
small, medium, and large Big Green Egg.
Why the varying sizes of the Big Green Egg?
I started with a medium, wanted a large, got that. The small is actually a trophy from winning Grand Champion at an Egg Fest.
Oh, so it's a prize, a free one.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always the best cookers, I've come to find out.
Absolutely.
So you have a variety of different ones to cook on. You have the charcoal-powered Weber Smoky Mountain. Ranch Kettle is a whole different monster that many always dream about, but few actually have. Is that a difficult piece of equipment to cook on and kind of learn, or is it just great to have that much space and know what you're doing?
I actually had a very expensive Texas offset pit that I bought from Jim Minion used. And the day after I started cooking on my first ranch kettle, I put that up for sale and bought my second ranch kettle because it was so much easier to use than a small backyard model offset, and it had so much more even cooking capacity that it's just one of my all-time favorite smokers. I'd be quite happy with just that as my only smoker for the rest of the life if I was just cooking on my back deck for myself.
What kind of a capacity can you get on there?
At its top end, you can put a 65-pound whole pig butterflied sunny side up on it.
Oh.
Or you can cook a whole case of anything, a whole case of brisket, a whole case of pork butt, a whole case of ribs. Just choose one case of meat and it'll cook the whole case.
So if you have to choose between the eggs and the Weber Smoky Mountains and the Ranch Kettle, it sounds like the Ranch would be the one that you would take, forsaking all others?
It's a very tough choice between that and a large egg, but if we're talking serious hardcore barbecue, yeah, I'd take the Ranch Kettle. The reason I'm torn between that and the egg is the egg does high temperature so well, and I love a good pizza, and the Ranch Kettle is never going to do a pizza as well as a green egg.
Do you have your eye on any other smokers or grills here in the near future that you'd like to get your hands on?
Absolutely. My very first year of competition, from cooking my first rookie event to qualifying for the Jack Daniels and the American Royal, took 16 weeks. And when I got to the American Royal, there was Jamie Greer with one of his Jambo pits. And I have been lusting after one of those ever since.
They're very sexy for pits, aren't they?
Oh, they absolutely are. That's just, since I first laid eyes on it, I've wanted it. And right now the money's sitting in the bank, burning a hole in my pocket, and I'm very seriously contemplating calling Jamie in the morning and saying, okay, let's talk.
Yeah, turnaround time on those is much more spectacular than it once was. You had to be in some type of secret society, and you had to take make sure that your number was picked out, and then you only had like 4 or 5 year waiting list after all of that rigmarole took place. But now it's like 6-8 weeks, and you got a Jambo pit, and there you go.
Yeah, I know. And, it's amazing that if you look at all the people that are cooking with them and all the people that have started cooking with them who started winning on other things but now are cooking on them and winning on them, it's very impressive.
I think if you take a quick proportionate look at who's winning weekend in, weekend out, just regarding cookers, FEC 100s are obviously doing quite a bit of winning during the course of the competition year, but more and more the Jambo pits really seem to be coming out of the woodwork. I mean, certainly a fabulous cooker, hands down, and that is one of the pits that will always be argued as being the ultimate competition cooker. You don't see him too much in the backyards for obvious reasons. But, it's coming from a guy who is probably, I don't know if he's definitely probably not underrated as a competition cook, but maybe one of the guys just because of when he was dominating competition barbecue. A lot of people maybe don't know the tradition of KCBS, but Jamie was a very, very awesome competition chef too.
I think he's one of those sleepers. He's one of the great pitmasters you haven't heard about, but he is one of the great pitmasters.
All right, so this kind of transitions us nicely into what you're doing. You have a website, and that web address is bbqclass.com. Not much left to the imagination with that title, which is very nice for the Centralites. But it seems that, maybe over the last 5 years or so, a lot of the competition chefs that have been experiencing some type of success have gone out of their way to launch some type of school where they're, charging $500, $600, $750 a head to kind of give them a free for all, an inside look, no secrets held back type deal. Some people think that it's just the cooks lining their pockets in order to offset some of the costs for the competitions that they're doing. Some feel that they don't know if they're being shown everything. And you have a class that is definitely affordable. So first, what kind of got you into wanting to do classes, and we'll build on from there.
Well, in my past work life, the 9-to-5 job that paid the bills, teaching was a big part of that. I started out as an aircraft mechanic, and I taught in aircraft maintenance college. So I've always done teaching, and I've always enjoyed doing teaching. And my own coming up through the ranks of barbecue involved several different schools. One of those was actually the first year of full competition in the Pacific Northwest. I was the Rookie of the Year, and my prize was an all-expense-paid trip to a competition. And I spoke to the sponsor and said, rather than sending me on an all-expense-paid trip to cook the competition I want to cook, why don't you send me to James and Lola Rice's class at the Close Factory in Houston? And he was like, okay, that's fine, we'll do that. And that was, them passing on what they knew. And James and Lola are also, people now might not have heard of them, but they did things like win back-to-back American Royals. So they're very deep experience there, and they're excellent cooks and wonderful people. And I learned a ton from them. And I've never really taught what anybody else taught me. I've kind of synthesized it into what I do and what I know, and I use my own recipes. But it just gives you, I think, any class a much better understanding when you see the process beginning to end and how the product is finally achieved, rather than a whole jumble of information which doesn't make sense because the pieces aren't sequential and the puzzle hasn't been put together for you to see how the pieces fit together.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, in your class versus some of the other ones, does it matter what kind of cook you are? A backyard guy can take your class, or somebody looking to do better who's a competitor looking to hone their skills and look to get calls can take it just as well as the backyard guy can?
Absolutely. I mean, and I've had everybody from people who've never cooked a hamburger to people who've walked and gotten their trophies handed to them, and all of them learn something in the class. Although the class is very much aimed at just turning out great barbecue, it's not about how do you make the ultimate KCBS-looking box. We don't do any boxing in the class. So from that aspect, it's not a competition class. Ours is, it's all about the meat. It's always all about being the meat. How do you make great-tasting barbecue? And for me, the definition of great-tasting barbecue is it needs to be tender, and it needs to be moist, and it needs to taste great before you put a drop of sauce on it.
We're talking with Konrad Haskins. You can find out more about him at his website, bbqclass.com. As you look back over, some of the competitions you've taken place, what are some of the most memorable items that you've won, or some of the most memorable competitions that you've actually cooked in?
Well, I think one of the most memorable ones is we went to the Nebraska State Championship in Omaha in 2003, and it was right before the Royal and the Jack. And we were just there to practice and get in the groove. And after the competition was over, and I've still got the organizer, we sat down and made a list of everything we'd done wrong. And then after we did that, we went to the award ceremony. We walked for every single thing you could imagine for, including team that had traveled the furthest to get to the contest. And then we were named grand champion.
Wow. So that's not too bad, right?
No. And I mean, we were cooking, in the heart of the Midwest against top teams that won the Jack and won the Royal and people like that. So it was a very deep field, and it was a wonderful win.
So how much does it cost to take the class? And I guess what's unique about yours is you have locations in Texas and in Washington State as well.
Right. The normal price is $250. Right now we're running a promotion because we've expanded our Texas classes, and right now the Texas classes are $199. But within a few months, everything's going to be $250 for the class.
All right. So when you buy in $199, what am I, as a potential consumer, getting for the price?
What you're getting is you're going to get a class manual, which gives you our rub recipes, our sauce recipes, and detailed instructions of exactly how we cook barbecue. So when you come to the class, you don't have to be a great note taker. We're giving you everything, nothing held back, all the recipes, all the techniques, well documented in a book. So you've got a good book to start with. And then we're going to, from scratch, cook brisket and cook pork shoulder and cook pork ribs, both baby backs and spares, and cook chicken and make rub and make sauce, and show you how the whole process works from start to finish so that you're confident to go home and repeat that yourself.
And it's not geared towards any one particular sanctioning body?
It's not geared to any one sanctioning body, and it's geared absolutely towards cooking great meat in the backyard. It's not how do you prepare a competition box.
Again, we're talking with Konrad Haskins. You can find out more about his class, bbqclass.com. And again, you have locations in Texas and as well as Washington State, and the Texas one at $199 right now. So I would imagine if the women kind of slacked off for Valentine's Day and they want to make it up to their barbecue-loving husband, this probably makes a great gift, right?
Absolutely.
Hint, hint, women. So, some of the other items aside from the class that we can talk about here, because you got a lot of experience in the competition side. There's been a lot of banter back and forth here, at least on the KCBS side of things. I believe I saw in the minutes for the board of directors meeting this month to start at least talking about allowing gas-powered cookers into competitions. Is that something that you would personally have an issue with?
I don't personally have an issue with it, and I don't think it's going to be how you're going to win, but I think you have a hard time intellectually justifying keeping propane cookers out when you've got computer-controlled pellet cookers that are allowed.
I think that's probably been my biggest argument to the people that are, and look, I completely understand where some of the old-timers, the purists, want to uphold how it was initially founded, but as you continue to change rules and allow the gurus and the stokers that are keeping temperature of your pit automatically, and then as you had mentioned, the pellet-fed cookers, which is basically setting a temperature on a control and it just auger feeds in and pretty much taking all what some would form the artwork out of fire management. All that's been lost, or you have the ability to not really have to learn that, and understanding that you still have to know how to cook it, but that's kind of a big portion of the whole cooking process that you don't have to worry about. And for me, I kind of struggle with that. I would like to see it go back to, logs or just charcoal, to have some of that potential liability where if you're not watching your game on the fire, that's what's really going to bite you in the ass in the end.
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's just take a reality check here for a second. How many people have traded in their other cookers, including FECs, and are now cooking on a classic Jamie Greer Jambo pit, offset. There's no stoker, there's no guru, there's no computer, and these people are winning more than at least 50% of all the other winners out there. I mean, right now, Jamie's Pits, which is just a basic classic, you need to be a master of fire, is one of the most dominant cookers out there. So it proves that it's the pit master and it's having a good pit, and all the technology isn't going to beat that.
So you're okay with letting the propane guys in too then, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can even bring those hockey puck electric things in. Bring them in. I'm going to kick their ass cooking on an old-fashioned classic cooker.
That's right. So bring your ass, because Conrad's going to kick it. Do you?
The more people that bring their money and pay the entry fees, there's more money for those of us that know how to cook to win. So I'm all down with it.
Also, I've heard that this would be an item, especially kind of a big hot button item for the propane distributors and the makers. Well, not makers of the propane, but the guys that are getting it out there, the retail guys that might add a little bit more sponsorship, which could ultimately lead to more prize money for these type of events anyway.
Absolutely, and I mean, what are the people who are against it scared of? I mean, I understand the traditionalists just want to be traditionalists for traditional's sake, but when you've got so many people winning against high tech with low tech, I think it's just really being master of the meat and master of the fire is what it's all about, and the technology is tertiary, not even secondary.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that thought there. Again, we're talking with Konrad Haskins. bbqclass.com is his website. So you have any competitions lined up here on the site you're going to be taking part of this year?
No, actually. I want to do some contests this year, but I just focused very much on expanding our classes in Texas, and that's got most of my weekends covered. But I'm looking at a couple with a buddy of mine who's one of my former students and has gone on to a lot of competition success, and he's doing cellular tower construction in the New England area. And those kind of outlying states are very appealing to me because there's only one state championship. So
right.
Even if I'm just helping him out and he wins, that's great, because if we win that contest, it's a straight ticket to the Jack, which is what it's all about.
Do you care to name drop who that person is?
Oh, sure. It's Jonathan Stewart of Smoking Carnivores.
Oh, yeah. Very nice. Now, it's something I wasn't going to bother bringing up, but since you kind of segued into it, probably not knowingly, when you talk about the American Royal, you talk about the Jack Daniels. Would you rather win, given the druthers, if you were told, Conrad, you can win this year in 2010, you can compete in the American Royal Invitational and win that, or you can compete in the Jack Daniels and win that, you would take the Jack, from what I could tell?
I don't even have to think about that.
Why is that exactly? For instance, I had Plowboys barbecue team on the couple days after they won the invitational side at the American Royal. And after talking about how great it was and what an emotional moment was, of course, the dick in me said, well, if you could trade away the American Royal Invitational knowing that you would win the Jack Daniels this year, would you do it? And he didn't say no. And everybody you talk to about those two, the edge always seems to slide over to Lynchburg.
It maybe it's cliched and maybe it's a cop-out, but it's one of those things you just have to experience. It's a completely different energy. It's a much smaller event. It's a lot more intimate. And it's just a lot more gratifying on a personal, emotional level. It's the word that comes to mind is really intimate. There's just a whole lot of people there that really care about you, and it's a great interaction. And the one thing they don't allow you to do at the Royal is you can't give away your barbecue. And at the Jack, what they actually do is they say, either please give your leftovers to our volunteers, or we will buy you a health permit and you can feed the crowd. And we always elected to feed the crowd. And it was just such a rewarding experience. It's not quite people's choice, but still, you're interacting with the crowd and you're feeding with them and you're getting feedback from them on how they like your food. And that whole interaction on a human level thing is just so rewarding.
Do you not buy into the argument that when you're staging competition to competition, you have the American Royal Invitational and all the people that have won and qualified to get in that versus you have to win a state declaration event in order to qualify for the Jack, but due to the drawing process and that whole mystique and how that kind of comes along, that the best teams are sometimes left on the sideline. So technically you could argue that you're not cooking against the best, where the American Royal Invitational is more to that fact.
I see your point, and I agree with it. And the interesting thing is we've actually walked at the Royal, both the Open and the Invitational, and the closest thing we've done is missing by half a point, getting an 11th place at the Jack. So we've never walked at the Jack. But I think when it's the hardest contest in the world to get into, period, and just being a grand champion only gets you a shot at it, doesn't get you a guaranteed thing, that whatever is the hardest thing to get is the most desired thing.
So you'll take the Jack no matter what.
Absolutely, yeah. That's been my opinion since 2002, and I have no intention of changing.
That's right. Not until you win it, and then you can go win the American Royal Invitational.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So, again, we're talking with Konrad Haskins. You can check out his barbecue class, bbqclass.com. And, Konrad, I certainly appreciate you coming on the show tonight. Also appreciate the fact that you're a sponsor of the show. I certainly appreciate that. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, just feel free to lob me a phone call, and love to have you back on again.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
All right, thanks for doing it. There he is, Konrad Haskins, championship barbecue pitmaster, weighing in on all different kinds of aspects of barbecue. I think his class is unique in the fact that it's not one of those high dollar, I'm going to show you everything. And do you wonder if you're dropping that kind of cash? I mean, do you wonder if the guy that you could potentially be competing with the following weekend is actually showing you everything in his arsenal? I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying, being the skeptical little cat I am, I would wonder. Processes are always good to know, that's for sure. But I would imagine if you're boning out, $500, $600, $700, they're probably showing you pretty much everything you need to know anyway. So, but if you're a backyard guy that's looking to improve your barbecue, or if you're a competitor looking to turn out a more consistent product, it's certainly a lot more affordable than 90% of the other classes that are going on right now. If you're in Texas, $199 for a barbecue cooking class. Are you kidding me? That is like cheap. That's cheap. And even at regular retail at $250, that is a bargain, and you're getting all the insides from a guy that really knows what he's doing. The dude was doing whole steers on a spit. Whole steers? Uh-oh. And I would pay $8.75 to see that live. That would be awesome. Can you imagine seeing a whole steer rotating on a pit? A pit spit? That would be. Does Bob from the Ribolator have one that can hold a whole steer? Can the Ribolator hold a whole steer? That is the question. Good Lord, have mercy. All right, there we go. It's going to wrap up After Dark. A little bit half past the hour. It's 10 for me, wherever you are. It's a little bit past 10, or a little bit half past where you are. Appreciate you joining me, as always, here on the After Dark, where we kind of unwind a little bit, let it loose. Drop words like and mother and hole, all that stuff. We bust loose here on this portion. Thanks again to Konrad Haskins for coming on and breaking down barbecue in general. His class, whole steers on a spit. Can't believe that. bbqclass.com. And again, we thank him for his sponsorship of the show, both the 9 o'clock show and the After Dark segment. What do we have coming up? I can tell you here in 1 second. Let me change my playlist rotation rules so we can dump some things here into the queue. Looks like we got a little bit of Celebrity Grill podcast coming up next with Scott Roberts as the guest. So stay tuned for that here in about 10 seconds. Thanks again to everybody tuning in to the regular show and After Dark. We'll see you back here next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget the BBQCentralShow.com streaming shows 24/7 when it's not just live here Tuesday. So check it out. The BBQCentralShow.com, Barbecue Central Radio Networks. See you back here next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Good night now.